Have you ever stopped to wonder why it always falls to cute young girls to save us from the end of the world? Hello everybody, Justus R. Stone here with another light novel review. I review light novels as well as doing news, countdowns of the most popular light novels in Japan. If you love light novels and you're brand new to the channel, you should subscribe. In today's review, I'm going to be covering volume number 1 of World End. What do you do at the end of the world? Are you busy? Will you save us? This one written by Akira Kareno. It is published in English by Yen On. It is complete in Japan. There were 5 volumes plus a sort of side story, an extra volume. Now, there's also a sequel series in Japan that currently has 6 volumes. There was recently an anime on this one. As far as I understand, it covered volumes 1 to 3 of the light novel series. If you want to pick up your own copy of this one in English, you can find links to Amazon and the book depository in the description down below. This is a fantasy novel told in the third person. It takes place in a alt-Earth where magic has existed and where humanity existed alongside different sort of beast races like lizard men and dog people and beast people and all that kind of stuff. And 500 years after these mythic 17 beasts raged across the planet and basically eradicated humanity, there's still civilization, but it exists on these floating islands. They've basically, well, because the beasts can't fly, makes sense, right? They're surviving by living on these islands. Thing is, humanity's gone. The only civilization that exists are these beast people. Enter into this world Willem. He's a human being who, well, I don't want to spoil how it is, but basically he has survived to this point, and now he is the last remaining human being. And he's called featureless because he doesn't have horns or fur or anything like that. And generally people like that are shunned because humanity has become kind of this myth of horror, basically, because they say that humanity were the ones that unleashed these beasts upon the world. Humanity is viewed as this terrible thing, this thing of terror that was against all the other races, and it's like the boogeyman, basically. In any case, so Willem, of course, being featureless and keeping the fact that he's actually one of these human beings secret, he's been working these really sort of low-end jobs because he's trying to pay back his debts to the people who rescued him from the surface. Now, one of these people says to him, "Hey, I've got a job that I think you might be okay for." Basically, it turns out that there are these secret weapons that have been developed by a sort of amalgamation of the Alliance, which is sort of the overruling government, and also the Guardsmen, which are sort of the local authorities. And it's kind of it's a little bit convoluted. You'll have to read the book to get the full gist. But essentially what they are is, in order to kind of smooth things over politically, there is a ceremonial position that the guardsmen have, that they have as a manager of the warehouse of these weapons. And so basically, Willem, through his connections, is put into this position. It's a dummy position. It's not supposed to really do anything. It's, like I said, pure symbolic. What he ends up discovering, though, is that these weapons are actually young girls. Young girls who are imbued with magic so that they can wield the magical swords of legend from 500 years ago. The very swords that Willem himself and his teammates wielded against the forces back in the past. And so now Willem finds himself in this situation where this past that he wants to leave behind is now right in front of him and in his face. And what can he do in terms of his relationship with these girls. Should he ignore it? Should he understand that they've basically been created to be disposable in order to keep society safe? And it creates this incredible dilemma, and that's where we have the book. What's really kind of interesting about this is that the book reads a lot more like a slice of life. It is not... What's interesting is for a book that has these rather cool magical swords. I don't want to get into, again, like, you really should read this book. I'm recommending it. But the swords, it's kind of an interesting idea how the swords are constructed. And so you have these mythical beasts, these 17 beasts that apparently eradicated the earth in a matter of like a week or so. And you've got these fairies, is what they call the girls, who have been bred basically to be weapons and to wield these swords against the beasts to make sure that they don't threaten what's left of society. Basically, war and violence and death is kind of the basis of this whole series, and yet we really don't see any of it. Because this book, as much as that is the backdrop, this book is much more about broken people trying to put themselves back together and to find a reason to live. We have Willem, who's a character who exists out of time. His world is gone. Everyone and everything he's ever known has been completely reduced basically to dust. Well, almost literally to dust. And so you have this character who is out of place and out of time. The people, the creatures, whatever you want to call them, that he once saw as his enemies are now the only civilization that exists. He really doesn't have a purpose. He really doesn't have a reason to exist. In fact, in a lot of ways, it's his obligation about this debt that is essentially carrying him through his day-to-day, is just this idea of earning this money to pay back this debt because he doesn't want to feel indebted to someone. And, who knows what he's going to do with himself after that. The fairies themselves are interesting in that they really don't have a sense of value of their own lives, or at least that seems to be a problem. Like they don't really see themselves as anything more than the tools that they have been created to be. And the book is basically about how sort of Willem and his interactions with these fairies start to break those boundaries between both of them, so that the fairies start to see themselves as actually having worth, and Willem starts to see that he actually has a place in this world beyond just paying off some debts. It's a bit sad and it's a bit tragic feeling because you just know that this isn't going to end well. I thought it was kind of funny because I reviewed, of course, Gun Gale Online was my last review, and we were talking about stakes. We were talking about, what drives characters and everything else. And what one person commented is that they hated phony stakes where it makes it sound like it's life or death, but we know that the characters aren't going to die. We just know that that's the rules. This book... No. I have a bad feeling that this is going to reduce me to like ugly snot crying when it's all said and done, because I just don't see how this is going to end on a happy note. And I know that's not going to be for everybody, but I think this book really kind of is embracing that philosophy that you see in a lot of sort of Asian film and stuff like that. And I mean, you've seen it a lot in anime and well, everything, all kinds of Asian media, basically, is that idea of that with gaining comes loss, that, sometimes the best things that we have are fleeting, and that it doesn't matter so much that they don't last forever. What matters is that you had them at all. And I think that's kind of what this series is prepping itself to be. I really liked this book, though. I think that it's kind of a combination of things. First of all, I really like books that have sort of that whole backstory. We really don't know what happened at the end of the previous world. We don't know how these islands rose up into the sky. We don't know how the beasts were really created. Everything is kind of half story, half myth, half truth. Even Willem, at this point, like, we haven't really seen him even reveal what all he knows about those final moments. So we don't even know if actually he does know, to be honest. I mean, well, read the book. You'd have to, that's big spoilers if I tell you that. But in any case, there's a lot of world building in this one. To be honest, when I first saw it, I kind of thought that it was literally our world that ended, but it is an alternate world that involved magic and, like I said, these different races of beings and everything else. So it's kind of like you've got a fantasy world that's been created and then been destroyed, and now we're setting the story in another fantasy world, but of course everything that happened before bears importance to the world as it exists in the book. So I really like that kind of thing. I like that whole idea of what is myth, what is truth, what really happened in the past, and having that kind of teased as you go along. I really like books that do that kind of stuff. So that aspect of this book really spoke to me. Plus, I've just found that the writing style of it, the way that it's written, really just seemed to evoke that bit of sort of fairy tale myth. It was really well done. And again, you know, when you're reading something that you know it's English wasn't the first language, you're not sure how much of that is the skills of the editor, how much of that is the skills of the original writer. The truth is that it's probably a combination of the two, and I think they work really well in this book. It just felt like the tone and the construction of the writing and everything else really suited the story that was being told. All in all, as like a post-apocalyptic type story, this one I thought was really kind of cool, and it was very, very different in its emotional core. As I said, it's very much more driven about the characters and these characters who are broken, trying to sort of pick up the pieces and find themselves and their purpose. There was like this one particular aspect that I think spoke really well to this, and it was that Willem kind of starts giving the fairies an idea that there's better ways to fight using these weapons, because, you know, he knows, right? And one of the fairies in particular sort of really rails against that idea, because to her, it's this realization that on the one hand, yes, there is that benefit that if we can fight better, we might survive. But on the other hand, it means that all the fairies that have died before, that they were wrong. And it's that aspect of wrongness, the aspect of, was our existence wrong? Have we been wrong up until this point? And I think that there's that aspect with Willem as well, right? Is that whole idea of, you know, what did humanity really do? Were we wrong in our existence? Were we wrong in the way that we carried ourselves and what we did? And I just love these plays back and forth about, you know, trying to find a new path, but at the same time having that difficulty of reconciling it with the past. All in all, WorldEnd Sukasuka, it really surprised me. I can say there was quite a number of story elements in this that I was not expecting. And for that, I really enjoyed it. I found it a very engaging read, and it just felt a lot different than a lot of the other light novels that I've been reading recently, and that, well, looking at my shelf, that we kind of have in general. It's just a little bit different. So this one I really enjoyed, and I'm very much looking forward to the rest of this series. Again, it's only 5 volumes, I guess, and then there's sort of this extra side story volume. Now, of course, that's not a long series, but then there's 6 more volumes in the sequel series, which hopefully this one does well, and we will get those books as well, because if the rest of this series lives up to this first volume, I'm in it for the rest of the series, because yeah, really enjoyed this one. Interested to hear your thoughts about it in the comments down below. Please, no spoilers for anything beyond volume 1, because I'm looking forward to reading more, and half of the fun of reading them is the surprise of what will happen next. For my next review, I'm going to continue to try and work through my to-be-read pile that's over my shoulder here. And my next review is going to be on volume number 11 of Is It Wrong to Try to Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon? Yeah, getting back to Danmachi, I love this series. I really do. It's just, you know, it's what been sitting on my shelf, and every time I look up at my shelf, I'm like, I gotta read that. I really do. So that's going to be my next review. So if you're brand new to the channel and you love light novels, you should subscribe. I do 2 to 3 reviews on a weekly basis, as well as the countdowns of the top 10 light novels in Japan, news, and the light novel podcast is posted on this channel as well. Thank you so much for joining me in this video. I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Till then, bye-bye for now.